Do you hear the music? Welcome back to Relatively Damaged by Damaged Parents. My name is Angela, and with me is
Kat.
Oh wow, and I have lost all my sound.
Oh
But you
no.
can hear me. So
I can hear
I'm gonna
you.
go, and then I will pop out for just a minute while you're reviewing the declaration. The
All
live shows
right.
are currently streamed on Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook and Twitter. Remember to follow and subscribe and share with your friends. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I discuss topics we find interesting for about 30 minutes. And today's topic, as it is July 4th, is the Declaration of Independence. So I'm going to exit out real quick and hopefully fix my sound problem. And Kat, please take it away.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. Happy July 4th. So we were talking about what is the promise of the Declaration of Independence. So I'm going to read part of it for you. Some of which we all know very well. Some we may not know quite as well. So it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
Okay, so you're gonna laugh. I always forget what despotism means, so I had to look that up. And it said the exercise of absolute power, especially in a cruel and oppressive way. And there's just so much in the Declaration of Independence to talk
And that's not even
about.
all of it, just that part, yeah.
Yeah. But do you mind if we start at the beginning with we hold these truths to be self-evident?
Of course.
And that and I think they're speaking to the truths in the statement that they're making, that all men, and I think they probably meant to say people, but that's me making a judgment, are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I'm wondering, are they self-evident to everyone?
That's a good question. And I think throughout our history, we've shown that it's not. Now, you made an assumption that they meant people. And
I did.
actually at the time it was written, and we interpret it that way today. At the time it was written, it was basically meant to be white propertied men.
Mm-hmm.
So that did not include African Americans. It did not include women. It was men. And we today interpret that as people because as it goes on later on to say that it can be changed. So we've changed over time. After the Civil War, black men were included. In the 1920s, women were included.
Mm-hmm.
By being given the power to vote.
Well, and
And
I'm
that,
just thinking, I'm really glad that they didn't specify that it was white propertied men in this document, because I think we could have really been in some deep trouble in then could we even trust the document?
right. I mean, the ideas that this came from, this is very much a product of the Enlightenment. And so it was this change in thought, where before, in European thought, it was largely based on a class system. So you had the king, you had the nobles, you had your gentry, and then you had your peasants, kind of kind of thing. It's basically the way it was in England, and so kind of more or less mirrored in other parts of Europe. And so that implied that there are some that are better than others.
Some people that are better than other people.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why you get phrases like, you need to know your place, don't question your betters. These are all from previous times, and the ideas kind of that have hung on from that. But this was a radical document insofar that it says, wait a minute, all men are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about it is the certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Which right there implies, in saying among these, to me, that that is not all.
Correct. And what else is there? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but these three we always say is the core. But it is very interesting that you emphasize that among these.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those may be three of the most important ones, three of the ones that we emphasize because they're specifically outlined. But what
Mm-hmm.
are our other rights that we have?
Yeah,
What are other unalienable rights that we have?
that's a fantastic question. I mean, right now is one of those moments where I wish we had a much larger audience that could start putting things in the chat that are like, well, it's this, and it's this, and it's this, right? Um, because like right now, sometimes I think a lot of those rights are we're not free to express some of those, or we'd go around doing things with the idea that we have freedom. But what is freedom? You see, I can work myself into a terrible mess.
Yeah. Well, it all goes down, and it's not. It doesn't say that in here, but we've talked about this before. The idea of freedom and responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I'll just give an example. You might think that it's freedom to blow off fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I have another point of view. I'm thinking, yes, it might be your freedom to go ahead and blow off fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
There are ordinances against that for very good reasons, because it may affect as it goes on further, their safety and their happiness. So we're experiencing a big dry spell right now. If
Right.
someone has a stray firework, it could land on my house, my neighbor's house, um, and cause a fire. So there is a right for the government to limit your happiness for the safety of all.
Right. So if we're looking at the safety of all, I mean, because it does talk about that later. It says, "As to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness." So the government has a responsibility, I think, is what I hear you saying, so that we
Right.
can have that safety and happiness.
Right. And the responsibility for that is given by them. We are not necessarily a hedonistic society where we allow everybody to do whatever they want, whatever makes them happy.
Mm-hmm.
We have a responsibility. And that's why I think we give some of that to the government in order to secure
Mm-hmm.
our safety and our happiness overall for everybody.
Right. And I see that here, we'll just go ahead and show a comment from Becky. She says she loves this discussion and she loves the points that you're making. I do too. I just, for me, on some level, I've got to challenge what does it mean? Um, what does safety and happiness mean? Like, I think some people, for instance, there's been conversation in the news about LGBTQ and certain laws in certain states. And I think like there was a recent law about uh, LGBTQ teachers with students under the third grade or something like that. I can't remember the exact specifics.
The don't say gay law in Florida.
Yes, yes. And I think what we keep, maybe we're forgetting, I don't know, is the fact that heterosexual people are also are perpetrators of things like that. Of not things like that. When I say things like that, what I'm meaning is the concern is that these people are going to make a comment in a classroom that says one thing, that is referencing a husband or a wife, so if it was female, it would be a wife as their partner, and that this would create confusion amongst the students. But and beyond that, I think there are some other concerns that because of that confusion, these students will then maybe have beliefs later that they're going to decide to be part of the LGBTQ group. I don't understand that because I don't think anyone really chooses. I think it's something inside of them, an inalienable right maybe is a word I could use, or a statement I could use, that to be who they are.
Well, right away that implies that there is a judgment
Mm-hmm.
on something. So, um, you know, and I agree with you on the point that you're making. So that's assuming that you as a parent have a right to say, I don't want my children to know about this,
Mm-hmm.
limiting the information that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing that, and by extension limiting what kind of books are available in libraries, limiting other people's speech, other people's rights, because you don't want your children exposed to that because of your own, and if you feel this way, I'm going to ask you to check it. Do you have your own internal prejudice?
Well,
where you're saying, I don't want this for my child. And and I think a lot of people come to that with
mm-hmm.
their own internal prejudice. I mean, and I don't want to get into the whole issue of abortion, which is more actually a right to a privacy. What I do with my body is my business. It is between me and my doctor.
Right. I just want to go back to the conversation though on that freedom, because I'm wondering that maybe that parent does have that freedom to say this is not what I want, and they have that freedom to choose not to participate in that. And also, I think there are freedoms that the people in the LGBTQ group also, they have a right and an alienable. So everyone's on we're
Okay.
we're at a cross, not a crossroads, but like how are people who don't believe that LGBTQ rights are valuable, or that being around those people is important, going to ever learn about that it is, and that these people are pretty freaking amazing and all of that, and it doesn't have anything to do, like, from my perspective, LGBTQ, that's someone else's choice. I don't get to dictate that.
Well, all right.
Not choice, not even choice.
So you are there's two things. What you're saying is, I want to limit choice. I don't want this for my children, so I don't want them to be exposed to it, and therefore I'm going to limit what everybody else does so my child doesn't get exposed to it. So if you
Right.
don't want your child exposed to
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ people, you don't want your child exposed to other religious ideas and beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
or non-religious ideas and beliefs, whatever difference they may be. You don't want your child to know anything else. You can choose to then limit your child. I think
Right.
that's horrible,
Mm-hmm.
but you could homeschool. You could, join an insular community. Um, and you can do that in order to have your happiness, and nobody is stopping you from doing that. But if you are trying to insinuate your beliefs in the public sphere by saying, I am going to limit your rights to
Right.
just be, just exist
Mm-hmm.
in a public way because I disagree with you, that is limiting the rights.
Right.
So in a sense, going back to the whole Declaration of Independence idea, by not allowing the colonists to be able to have a voice,
Mm-hmm.
and especially by allowing, by imposing taxes upon them. Well, yeah, we're not allowing you a voice, but you just have to pay what we say you need to pay.
Mm-hmm.
That's limiting their freedom. So if you are telling a person who's LGBTQ, you have no right to exist. You can't enjoy the privacy of relations in your own home. You can't enjoy the contractual obligations that marriage brings. And in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, let's face it, on a secular level, marriage is nothing more than a contract.
Yeah. Something that just popped into my mind though is that what if the numbers were different? What if there were more people that were LGBTQ than were heterosexual, and what would that look like? Would is it possible that the LGBTQ people might also be like, well, you're heterosexual, and so therefore you can't show yourself in public because that's just not the social norm right now? And as I think about that, I'm like, well, I don't feel like that's what I'm hearing from the LGBTQ group as a whole right now. Um, and I'm just throwing out this, what if the world were opposite kind of thing, and
Well,
how would that show up?
that's the absurdity of it all, and I think that's why we really need to go back to what are the ideas. Does my freedom impinge upon your freedom? Freedom is not a pie
Mm-hmm.
where there's a finite amount to go around.
Right.
Freedom can mean something for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so just because I am granted a right, an explicit right that was denied before because of ideas that came from a religious point of view, i.e., marriage is between a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
That because I'm denied that right, why should my right to marry doesn't impinge upon your right to marry as a heterosexual?
Right.
So why is it a big deal? What I do in the privacy of my own home, as long as I am not doing something that is illicit, i.e., a minor who can consent, something between consensual adults. As long,
Right.
I mean, if I'm not abusing minors, if I'm not abusing animals,
Again, I'm gonna say that happens from the heterosexual perspective all the time.
well, yes,
Heterosexuals do that too. On a
well,
And I think percentage is much higher. Probably. I don't know. I don't know the statistics.
yeah. I mean, we can just guess. My point is that What two consenting adults do in the privacy of their own home is nobody's business.
Mhm.
Whether they're an interracial couple, whether they're a gay or lesbian couple, whether or not they're a cross dresser and enjoy dressing, of the opposite sex of their own gender identity, um, it's nobody's business as long as they are not hurting someone, as long as they are not impinging upon the rights of others for their
Right.
safety and their happiness.
Hmm. And so I'm trying to also think, how do people figure out if someone is impinging on their freedom? Because I think, like, for instance, child support is probably a big one. Wherein there are children involved, and the courts say that the parent not involved with the child needs to pay child support, and that parent might say, "Well, you're infringing on my freedom." And now I have to pay child support.
Again, that goes to the responsibility aspect for it. We have certain responsibilities. But bringing a child in this world takes two people to do it.
Right.
Um, generally speaking, I mean, we can go into exceptions on that, like in vitro and all that kind of stuff. But let's talk about that situation. If if and usually this happens between men and women, and usually more often than not, women get the custody of the child and then have to fight for child support. So
Mm-hmm.
let's just take the most common thing. A man decided to engage in an activity that possibly created a child. That, if a woman has to go through and carry that child and give birth to that child and chooses to raise that child, the man who chose to have sex with the woman should have to face the consequences of that, which includes child support.
Right. And the
The
reason I
free
think,
the freedom to enjoy that sexual relation has a responsibility that could come out of it.
right. Sorry, Lisa said, "Love your green globes." Yes, I'm practicing being just a whole on not worrying about judgment today. Thanks, Lisa. Um, I think that, yes, that comes with responsibility, and then they say no when there are consequences to say no. Again, the government stepped in because there was this bigger problem that I think was causing more pain and suffering within our country or within our states, because I think the states are the ones who hold the parents accountable. That
Mm-hmm.
said, this is affecting their safety and happiness, the children specifically, and
Exactly.
so we had to think of it. So then the government said, "Look, you guys are not behaving as if your freedoms are important, like that you're taking responsibility for your freedom. Therefore, now we're going to put in place a law or a rule that says this is how you care for your children." I mean, even in California, there are specific duties a parent is required to do. Um, or the child can be taken away. I believe it's in every state. There
Mm-hmm.
are rules like this,
Right.
in an
So
effort to protect the children.
well, exactly, because it's recognizing that children, as born people, have certain rights. And yes, they are minors, so they do not have the full capacity to exercise the rights yet, because they don't have the full capacity to participate. And we've determined that 18 is that age when they can,
Right.
by giving them the power to vote. But parents do have a responsibility because they chose to exercise their right to,
Have the
in
child.
whatever form, to have a child. And it's
Yeah.
two parents, generally speaking.
Hmm.
um so so that's what I mean about rights and responsibilities. It's the same thing. You're driving a car. We have to go through a licensing procedure because we as a society have determined that in order to be able to have the responsibility of driving a car, you have to have the responsibility of knowing what you're doing, understanding the traffic laws, which institute safety for everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this balance here where
Yeah.
where we go, and there it's a constant evolving situation. Our founding fathers could not have imagined the things that we live with today. They couldn't imagine you and I having a live conversation broadcast to everyone
Mm-hmm.
from 2,000 miles apart.
Right. Right. I, yeah, they could, and they couldn't foresee all of the challenges that, because there was no way to know how, how the world was going to change moving forward.
Exactly. So
You know.
therefore we have to change. But if we hold these ideas, the core ideas that came here, that we are all created equal, that we all have these unalienable rights,
Mm-hmm.
and we agree as a society to bring those together and to allow for those rights, provided that we take the responsibility of leaving open happiness and safety for everyone.
Yeah, and in my mind, I'm wondering, how do I set myself up, or what questions can I ask myself to determine if the decisions I'm making are impinging on these unalienable rights, and how do I determine what I believe are unalienable rights? And I think that as I take that into consideration, and I start asking myself about my beliefs and about where I stand, that maybe I can figure out, I might come to the conclusion that my perception is impinging on someone else's right. Um, what do I do with that? What happens next, right? Do I make the decision to continue forward because my belief says one thing, or do I have to change? For me, I would change gears. But coming to the conclusion that I'm impinging on someone else's rights is going to be, I think, a hard sell. I don't know what other word to use there. A hard negotiation, because how could I, right? So if I'm sitting here and I think I'm doing something that's right, how could I be impinging on someone else's rights if I truly believe that what they're doing is wrong?
You are making a judgment. You are believing what they are doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Are they doing what is wrong? Is that affecting you personally?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question.
Mm-hmm.
Is what you are doing affecting someone else? Is what someone else doing affecting you personally?
Right.
So I am in a homosexual relationship. How does that affect you?
It doesn't.
Okay, so here's the test. So if you say we're going to pass a law because I don't believe in homosexuality, your belief and your insistence on passing something is affecting my right because it doesn't affect you. Now, you and I are, let's, for argument's sake, we're living in the same community, and you love to go out there and blast your fireworks. And I'm harping on this because I'm so mad
I
about
hate
fireworks.
fireworks, but
Yeah, I do
I'll take
too.
it. I'll take it.
I hate fireworks by unprofessionals. But so you love to go out and blast fireworks, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you live in California. You guys always have drought conditions out there,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And I'm your neighbor, and I know that there's drought conditions. I know the grass is dry, the trees are dry, the house is dry, and I'm like, wait a minute, we need to pass a law to say unauthorized fireworks need to be banned.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and I come and I say, here's the reason why: because we have these conditions, because it is a danger to society. You would impinge upon my safety and my happiness if you
Mm-hmm.
burned my house down because you wanted to enjoy blowing off fireworks because you're weird. Um, And so, there's the difference. There's the kind of the litmus test.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Again, we're talking about safety and happiness,
right.
right?
So that's kind of the test. And so, going back to the I don't want this, I don't want this taught. I don't want this expressed. I want to ban these books from the libraries.
Right.
Okay, how is that if a library has a certain book and you don't want to read it and you don't want your children to read it, because libraries are committed to having the expression of ideas across the board.
Mm-hmm.
How is that book being in the library affecting your rights or your
I don't
child's
think it.
rights?
I really don't think it does impact my rights. I think if I were a parent that was worried and thought that that type of behavior was wrong, that then they would go into the library and if the child brought home that book, there would be an offense taken by the parent because now the library is supporting, like there could be this whole justification as to why it's wrong. But again, it's still on the it's still a belief and a judgment that that parent has that it's wrong.
Right. And I understand what you're saying. But do you understand that saying is I have a child and I think my child should be able to read that book. And I
Right.
think that my library should support that.
Right.
So by you insisting that that book be removed from the library,
Impinges on the right of the person who wants
of
to read
other
it.
people who wants to read it. And you could say, no, I'm not going to read it. I'm going to go with my child to the library to monitor what books they read.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they bring it home, I'm going to tell them, no, that book is not acceptable. You can't read that, and just bring it back. So there are
Right.
things that you can do
That you're
if
still
you
free
don't
to do.
free to do to believe that without impinging the rights of someone else.
Well, and I think it's really interesting because at this point, if even just talking about the book, we're impinging on the right of the child to be aware of what's in this world. By taking or leaving, we're making a decision, and does the child have rights?
And I would argue that a child does have rights within the limitations of reasonable parental responsibility.
Yeah.
Because I will say this as someone who is in the LGBTQ community. I didn't have books that I could read when I was growing up to learn about it. I barely knew about it. There was nothing about reading a book, about seeing a movie, seeing a television show. The internet wasn't around then, at least not in an accessible way as it is today, to turn me gay.
Well, I don't know. And speaking
So,
from my perspective as a heterosexual, there is no show. I mean, I could watch all those shows, but I just don't like girls that way. I just don't. I love having friends. But I'm attracted to men, and I don't think there's any show that I could have watched. I mean, I think from a psychological perspective, if I'd been inundated and thought that was the only way, et cetera, then maybe. But I still would. Then I would think something was wrong with me because I was heterosexual.
okay. So take that. You took that understanding. And
Mhm.
so imagine how gay people have felt throughout the years.
Yeah.
And just the idea that what you your most basic kind of instinct is wrong. And so for people to say that, how can dare you can say that that something is wrong for me? If
Yeah.
it's not impinging on your right, let me be who I am. Your children are not yours to own. They are not your property. Your children are yours to raise. They're going to come up with your own ideas. The idea is to give them a foundation of rights, that you
Yeah.
have these rights, but you also have responsibilities
Right.
to your family, to your community. And so, you know, we don't have to be the same religion that our parents were, because that's what we were raised. We don't have to believe everything that we are told from the pulpit. Question ideas, explore ideas. I think that is the whole point of here, is the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. And I just, what you brought up for me was there's a really great poem that I actually put on my, in a place I could see every day in my home, and it's by Khalil Gibran, and it literally starts out with, "Your children are not your children. Um, they're sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you," um, I wish I could see this better because I don't have a copy of it. Ah, here we go. "And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable." But so we are the bows as parents,
Right.
and we
Well, and
need to
aren't we
seek to not make them like ourselves, but to be like them. There's so much wisdom in children.
and whether or not we're parents or not, aren't we essentially all bows? Aren't, even if we haven't birthed parents, aren't we all the idea, the to give the idea of the promise of the Declaration of Independence
Yeah.
to those who come after us, whether
Really
or not they are our children.
yeah. Yeah. To emulate what the Declaration of Independence really stands for. How do we live that in our lives? And I think that's a
Exactly.
fantastic question to close on, and we are way over.
But it was good. It was worth
It
it.
was yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and really thinking about what does this mean, and how do I interpret it, and how might others interpret it, and you know, kind of switching shoes for groups,
Yeah.
how is
And,
this
and that's
going to
what I
work?
challenge. I hope that that's through this conversation, that's what we challenge people to think about and to express going forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm Angela.
And I'm Kat.
We'll see you next week.